The Nowata Methodist Church is happy to produce a lot of different content for the edification of Christ's church throughout the world. This daily segment that you're listening to right now corresponds with the Daily Bible Reading Challenge, which is hosted by Christ Church in Moscow, Idaho. If you want to download the list of readings that they publish for yourself or learn more about this challenge, this initiative, go to biblereading.christkirk.com. I'm Jeffrey Rickman. I'm the pastor here in Nowata, and I read from the Berean Standard Bible, which you can also find at berean.bible. Consider subscribing to this podcast to be a part of this daily effort to grow in familiarity with and love of God's holy word. Let's dive in for today. Hey, I hope you're doing well. I'm Jeffrey. Glad to spend this time with you. I've been reading through the Bible for several months now, have done more than 70 of these sessions. It's been really good for me. There have been a lot of people along for the ride with me, and if this is your first time, then join right up and follow along and do your best. This corresponds with a thing from Christ Church in Moscow, Idaho. They published the list, and so we just recently had a catch-up day, and so I took a day off, and now I'm back at it, so I'm glad to have you with me. And we'll get into, we are in 1 Samuel now, chapter 26. Let's move forward together. Then the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah and said, "Is not David hiding on the hill of Hachilah opposite Jeshimon?" So Saul, accompanied by 3,000 chosen men of Israel, went down to the wilderness of Ziph to search for David there. Saul camped beside the road at the hill of Hachilah opposite Jeshimon, but David was living in the wilderness. When he realized that Saul had followed him there, David sent out spies to verify that Saul had arrived. Then David set out and went to the place where Saul had camped. He saw the place where Saul and Abner, son of Ner, the general of his army, had lain down. Saul was lying inside the inner circle of the camp with the troops camped around him. And David asked Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai, son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, "Who will go down with me to Saul in the camp?" "I will go with you," answered Abishai. That night David and Abishai came to the troops, and Saul was lying there asleep in the inner circle of the camp with his spear stuck in the ground by his head. And Abner and the troops were lying around him. Abishai said to David, "Today God has delivered your enemy into your hand. Now therefore, please let me thrust the spear through him into the ground with one stroke. I will not need to strike him twice." But David said to Abishai, "Do not destroy him, for who can lift a hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless?" David added, "As surely as the Lord lives, the Lord himself will strike him down. Either his day will come and he will die, or he will go into battle and perish. But the Lord forbid that I should stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed. Instead, take the spear and water jug by his head, and let us go." So David took the spear and water jug by Saul's head, and they departed. No one saw them or knew about it, nor did anyone wake up. They all remained asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen on them. Then David crossed to the other side and stood atop the mountain at a distance. There was a wide gulf between them. And David shouted to the troops and to Abner, son of Ner, "Will you not answer me, Abner?" "Who calls to the king?" Abner replied. So David said to Abner, "You are a man, aren't you? And who in Israel is your equal? Why then did you not protect your lord the king when one of the people came to destroy him? This thing you have done is not good. As surely as the Lord lives, all of you deserve to die, since you did not protect your Lord, the Lord's anointed. Now look around. Where are the king's spear and water jug that were by his head?" Then Saul recognized David's voice and asked, "Is that your voice, David, my son?" "It is my voice, my lord and king," David said. And he continued, "Why is my lord pursuing his servant? What have I done? What evil is in my hand? Now please, may the Lord the king, my lord the king, hear the words of his servant. If the Lord has stirred you up against me, then may he accept an offering. But if men have done it, may they be cursed in the presence of the Lord. For today they have driven me away from sharing in the inheritance of the Lord, saying, Go serve other gods. So do not let my blood fall to the ground far from the presence of the Lord. For the king of Israel has come out to look for a flea, like one who hunts a partridge in the mountains. Then Saul replied, I have sinned. Come back, David, my son. I will never harm you again, because today you considered my life precious. I have played the fool and have committed a grave error. Here is the king's spear, David answered. Let one of the young men come over and get it. May the Lord repay every man for his righteousness and faithfulness, for the Lord delivered you into my hand today, but I would not stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed. As surely as I valued your life today, so may the Lord value my life and rescue me from all trouble. Saul said to him, May you be blessed, David my son. You will accomplish great things and will surely prevail. So David went on his way, and Saul returned home. 1 Samuel chapter 27. David, however, said to himself, One of these days now I will be swept away by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than to escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will stop searching for me all over Israel, and I will slip out of his hand. So David set out with 600 men and went to Achish, son of Maoch, the king of Gath. David and his men settled in Gath with Achish. Each man had his family with him, and David had his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail of Carmel, the widow of Nabal. And when Saul learned that David had fled to Gath, he no longer searched for him. Then David said to Achish, If I have found favor in your eyes, let me be assigned a place in one of your outlying towns, so I can live there. For why should your servant live in the royal city with you? That day Achish gave him Ziklag, and to this day it still belongs to the kings of Judah. And the time that David lived in Philistine territory amounted to 1 year and 4 months. Now David and his men went up and raided the Geshurites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites. From the ancient times, these people had inhabited the land extending to Shur and Egypt. Whenever David attacked a territory, he did not leave a man or woman alive, but he took the flocks and herds, the donkeys, camels, and clothing. Then he would return to Achish, who would ask him, What have you raided today? And David would reply, The Negev of Judah, or the Negev of Jerahmeel, or the Negev of the Kenites. David did not leave a man or woman alive to be brought to Gath, for he said, Otherwise they will report us, saying, This is what David did, and this was David's custom the whole time he lived in Philistine territory. So Achish trusted David, thinking, Since he has made himself an utter stench to his people Israel, he will be my servant for Israel forever. 1 Samuel chapter 28. Now in those days the Philistines gathered their forces for warfare against Israel. So Achish said to David, You must understand that you and your men are to go out to battle with me. David replied, Then you will come to know what your servant can do. Very well, said Achish. I will make you my bodyguard for life. Now by this time Samuel had died, and all Israel had mourned for him and buried him in Ramah, his own city. And Saul had removed the mediums and spiritists from the land. The Philistines came together and camped at Shunem, while Saul gathered all Israel and camped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the Philistine army, he was afraid and trembled violently. He inquired of the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him by dreams or Urim or prophets. Then Saul said to his servants, Find me a woman who is a medium, so I can go and consult her. There is a medium at Endor, his servants replied. So Saul disguised himself by putting on different clothes, and he set out with 2 of his men. They came to the woman at night, and Saul said, "Consult a spirit for me. Bring up for me the one I name." But the woman replied, "Surely you know what Saul has done, how he has killed the mediums and spiritists in the land. Why have you set a trap to get me killed?" Then Saul swore to her by the Lord, "As surely as the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this." "Whom shall I bring up for you?" the woman asked. "Bring up Samuel," he replied. But when the woman saw Samuel, she cried out in a loud voice and said to Saul, "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul." "Do not be afraid," the king replied. "What do you see?" "I see a god coming up out of the earth," the woman answered. "What does he look like?" asked Saul. "An old man is coming up," she replied, "and he is wearing a robe." So Saul knew that it was Samuel, and he bowed face down in reverence. Then Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" "I am deeply distressed," replied Saul. "The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has turned away from me. He no longer answers me either by prophets or by dreams. So I have called on you to tell me what to do." "Why do you consult me?" asked Samuel, "since the Lord has turned away from you and become your enemy?" "He has done exactly what he spoke through me. The Lord has torn the kingship out of your hand and given it to your neighbor David. Because you did not obey the Lord or carry out his burning anger against Amalek, the Lord has done this to you today. Moreover, the Lord will deliver Israel with you into the hand of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. And the Lord will deliver the army of Israel into the hand of the Philistines." Immediately, Saul fell flat on the ground, terrified by the words of Samuel, and his strength was gone, because he had not eaten anything all that day and night. When the woman came to Saul and saw how distraught he was, she said to him, "Look, your maidservant has obeyed your voice. I took my life in my hands and did as you told me. Now please listen to your servant and let me set a morsel of bread before you so you may eat and have the strength to go on your way." Saul refused, saying, "I will not eat." But his servants joined the woman in urging him, and he heeded their voice. He got up from the ground and sat on the bed. The woman had a fattened calf at her house, and she quickly slaughtered it. She also took flour, kneaded it, and baked unleavened bread. She served it to Saul and his servants, and they ate. And that night they got up and left. 1 Samuel 29 now. Now the Philistines brought all their forces together at Aphek, while Israel camped by the spring in Jezreel. As the Philistine leaders marched out, their units of hundreds and thousands, David and his men marched behind them with Achish. Then the commanders of the Philistines asked, "What about these Hebrews?" Achish replied, "Is this not David, the servant of King Saul of Israel? He has been with me all these days, even years, and from the day he defected until today I have found no fault in him." But the commanders of the Philistines were angry with Achish and told him, "Send that man back and let him return to the place you assigned him. He must not go down with us into battle only to become our adversary during the war. What better way for him to regain the favor of his master than with the heads of our men? Is this not the David about whom they sing in their dances? Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." So Achish summoned David and told him, "As surely as the Lord lives, you have been upright in my sight, and it seems right that you should march in and out with me in the army, because I have found no fault in you from the day you came to me until this day. But you have no favor in the sight of the leaders. Therefore turn back now and go in peace, so that you will not do anything to displease the leaders of the Philistines." "But what have I done?" David replied. What have you found against your servant from the day I came to you until today, to keep me from going along to fight against the enemies of my lord the king?" Achish replied, "I know that you are as pleasing in my sight as an angel of God. But the commanders of the Philistines have said he must not go into battle with us. Now then, get up early in the morning, along with your master's servants who came with you, and go as soon as it is light." So David and his men got up early in the morning to return to the land of the Philistines. And the Philistines went up to Jezreel. 1 Samuel chapter 30. On the third day, David and his men arrived in Ziklag, and the Amalekites had raided the Negev, attacked Ziklag, and burned it down. They had taken captive the women and all who were there, both young and old. They had not killed anyone, but had carried them off as they went on their way. When David and his men came to the city, they found it burned down, and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. So David and the troops with him lifted up their voices and wept until they had no strength left to weep. David's two wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel, had been taken captive. And David was greatly distressed because the people spoke of stoning him, because the soul of every man grieved for his sons and daughters. But David found strength in the Lord, his God. Then David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, "Bring me the ephod." So Abiathar brought it to him, and David inquired of the Lord, "Should I pursue these raiders? Will I overtake them?" "Pursue them," the Lord replied, "for you will surely overtake them and rescue the captives." So David and his 600 men went to the brook of Besor, where some stayed behind, because 200 men were too exhausted to cross the brook. But David and 400 men continued in pursuit. Now his men found an Egyptian in the field and brought him to David. They gave the man water to drink and food to eat, a piece of a fig cake and 2 clusters of raisins. So he ate and was revived, for he had not had any food or water for 3 days and 3 nights. Then David asked him, "To whom do you belong? And where are you from?" "I am an Egyptian," he replied, "the slave of an Amalekite. My master abandoned me 3 days ago when I fell ill. We raided the Negev of the Kerethites, the territory of Judah, and the Negev of Caleb, and we burned down Ziklag." "Will you lead me to these raiders?" David asked. And the man replied, "Swear to me by God that you will not kill me or deliver me into the hand of my master, and I will lead you to them." So he led David down, and there were the Amalekites spread out over all the land, eating, drinking, and celebrating the great amount of plunder they had taken from the land of the Philistines and the land of Judah. And David struck them down from twilight until the evening of the next day. Not a man escaped, except 400 young men who fled, riding off on camels. So David recovered everything the Amalekites had taken, including his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, young or old, son or daughter, or any of the plunder the Amalekites had taken. David brought everything back. And he recovered all the flocks and herds which his men drove ahead of the other livestock, calling out, "This is David's plunder." When David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to follow him from the brook of Besor, they came out to meet him and the troops with him. As David approached the men, he greeted them. But all the wicked and worthless men among those who had gone with David said, "Because they did not go with us, we will not share with them the plunder we recovered, except for each man's wife and children. They may take them and go." But David said, "My brothers, you must not do this with what the Lord has given us. He has protected us and delivered into our hands the raiders who came against us. Who will listen to your proposal? The share of the one who went into battle will match the share of the ones who stayed with the supplies. They will share alike." And so it has been from that day forward. David established this statute as an ordinance for Israel to this very day. When David arrived in Ziklag, he sent some of the plunder to his friends, the elders of Judah, saying, Here is a gift for you from the plunder of the Lord's enemies. He sent gifts to those in Bethel, Ramoth, Negev, and Jatir, to those in Aroer, Sifmoth, and Eshtemoa, in those in Rakal and in the cities of the Jerahmeelites and Kenites, to those in Hormah, Borashan, and Athak, and to those in Hebron, and in all the places where David and his men had roamed. 1 Samuel chapter 31. Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled before them, and many fell slain on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines followed hard after Saul and his sons, and they killed Saul's sons, Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. When the battle intensified against Saul, the archers overtook him and wounded him critically. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and run it through me, or these uncircumcised men will come and run me through and torture me." But his armor-bearer was terrified and refused to do it. So Saul took his own sword and fell on it. When his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he too fell on his own sword and died with him. So Saul, his 3 sons, his armor-bearer, and all his men died together that same day. When the Israelites along the valley and those on the other side of the Jordan saw that the army of Israel had fled, and that Saul and his sons had died, they abandoned their cities and ran away. So the Philistines came and occupied their cities. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip the dead, they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. They cut off Saul's head, stripped off his armor, and sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines to proclaim the news in the temples of their idols and among their people. They put his armor in the temple of the Ashtoreths and hung his body on the wall of Bethshan. When the people of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all their men of valor set out, journeyed all night, and retrieved the bodies of Saul and his sons from the wall of Bethshan. When they arrived at Jabesh, they burned the bodies there. Then they took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree in Jabesh, and they fasted 7 days. All right, that's the end of 1 Samuel. We'll pick up in 2 Samuel tomorrow. For now, we've got Psalms 57 and 63. Here's 57. Have mercy on me, O God, have mercy. For in you my soul takes refuge. In the shadow of your wings I will take shelter until the danger has passed. I cry out to God Most High, to God who fulfills his purpose for me. He reaches down from heaven and saves me. He rebukes those who trample me. Selah. God sends forth his loving devotion and his truth. My soul is among the lions. I lie down with ravenous beasts, with men whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongues are sharp swords. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. May your glory cover all the earth. They spread a net for my feet. My soul was despondent. They dug a pit before me, but they themselves have fallen into it. Selah. My heart is steadfast, O God, my heart is steadfast. I will sing and make music. Awake, my glory. Awake, O harp and lyre. I will awaken the dawn. I will praise you, O Lord, among the nations. I will sing your praises among the peoples. For your loving devotion reaches to the heavens, and your faithfulness to the clouds. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. May your glory cover all the earth. Psalm 63. O God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My body yearns for you. In a dry and weary land without water. So I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and glory. Because your loving devotion is better than life, my lips will glorify you. So I will bless you as long as I live. In your name, I will lift my hands. My soul is satisfied with the richest of foods. With joyful lips, my mouth will praise you. When I remember you on my bed, I think of you through the watches of the night. For you are my help. I will sing for joy in the shadow of your wings. My soul clings to you. Your right hand upholds me. But those who seek my life to destroy it will go into the depths of the earth. They will fall to the power of the sword. They will become a portion for foxes. But the king will rejoice in God. All who swear by him will exult, for the mouths of liars will be shut. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Thus ends the life of Saul, the king who was anointed and then quickly ruined everything. Thus continued the life of David, who, even though many people lift him up as something akin to a saint, was regularly engaged in deception. I think he was genuine in his good intent towards Saul, but it was clear as he was serving that Philistine lord that he was being quite deceptive. So it's always hard for me to know what to do with some of these, especially Old Testament heroes who have a lot of energy for guile. So I haven't worked out a good systematic theology of that other than to say the Old Testament is not the same as the New or the Old Covenant, but that's kind of sloppy. So anyway, I won't dwell on the things that bother me. It's just amazing that the Lord provided for David, even though he had a king after him, and he prospered his way, even though it seemed like death was all around him. And if you're not connecting these Psalms he wrote to the situation he was in, then you should, because they obviously are connected. So that'll conclude our time today. I hope you continue to rejoice in knowing the content of God's word. Of course, it's impossible to soak it all in, but at least you're getting familiar with it, and you can dwell on these things in your own time. Blessed is the man who meditates on God's word day and night. I hope you rejoice in thinking on the Lord in your bed and rejoicing and contemplating in his goodness. All right, I'll see you tomorrow.